Hey guys, in this video I'll be going over navigation for the Viper. The Viper has three things for navigation. It has the backup compass, it has TACAN, and it has Waypoint navigation. First I'll go over the backup compass. This is just a regular magnetic compass. You'll probably never need to use this in DCS, but it's there in case you need it. Before I go over TACAN and Waypoint navigation, I want to go over the EHSI. This is just like an HSI in any other plane. The only difference is that this is an electric one. You can use this knob to adjust the heading bug and this one to adjust the course line. If you left click on the course knob, you can adjust the brightness, and after a couple seconds it'll get out of brightness mode and then you can adjust the course again. Now this HSI has different master modes. By default you're in normal waypoint mode. If you click it, it goes into waypoint ILS mode. If you click it again, it goes to TACAN, and then the last one is TACAN ILS mode. I'm not going to go over the ILS modes in this video because that will be for the ILS landing video. In this video I'll just go over the regular nav mode and TACAN mode. Whenever you are in regular nav mode, the outer blue arrow will point to your selected waypoints, and it'll also show how far away it is in nautical miles. The next thing to go over for the video is TACAN, so let's set this to TACAN mode. TACAN allows you to navigate to these triangle markers on the map. If you want to see if an airbase has a TACAN, another way you can tell is by just clicking on the airbase and looking at the TACAN field right here. Every TACAN station has a channel number and a band. The band can be either X or Y. For example, you can see at Senaki the TACAN is 31X. So first you need to set the TACAN up. On your computer screen here, make sure you're in the main menu. You can get to the main menu by clicking the return button, and then click number 1 to open the TACAN menu. And you can use this knob here to select the different fields. The right side of the screen is for ILS, which will not be in this video, but the left side controls TACAN. So first you need to type in the channel. I'm going to go to Senaki, so I need channel 31. Just type in 31 and click enter. And then you need to select your band. Senaki was band X, which is already selected, but in case you need to change it to band Y, you can just click 0 and click enter, and it changes it to band Y, but I'm going to go back to band X. If you press the sequence button, it'll switch between the different modes. If you have it in receive mode, it will give you direction. In transmit receive mode, it will give you direction and range. There's also air-to-air transmit receive. This will give you the distance only to another airplane with TACAN. In order for that to work, you and the other plane need to be on the same band, and you need to be 63 channels apart. For example, if I'm on channel 1, the other person needs to be on channel 64. I'm going to go back to transmit receive mode. Once you connect to the station, you should see it say beacon here with the airport name. As you can see for Senaki Kolki, the TACAN name is TSK, and you can see TSK. The TACAN has a volume knob right here. If you turn it up, you can hear the Morse code. I'm going to turn it down. Once you have your TACAN set up, you need to go to your EHSI, and you need to set it to TACAN mode. So click the master button until it goes to TACAN mode. Then you should see your range, and also the outer blue arrow will show you where the TACAN is. For example, it says 15.4 nautical miles. So let's test it. I'm going to get the ruler and click on my plane and click on Senaki, and it says 15.5. The last thing for navigation in the Viper is Waypoint navigation. But before I get into Waypoint navigation, I need to go over the HSD page. You can select it by clicking the HSD button on your MFD. The HSD page, it will show where all your waypoints are. You can adjust the range right here. You can also adjust the range with your slew cursor. You need to have the data management switch down, and you need to have your radar cursor. If you do data management switch down until you select your screen, you should see the white box around it when it's selected. If you move your cursor up or down, you can increase or decrease the range. Also, if you're wondering what this blue line is here, that is your radar cone. Right here it says depressed, which means that it's looking more forward, and if you click it, you can put it to centered mode. Also, this here means it's decoupled. If you press it, it goes into coupled mode, which means that when you adjust the range on your radar, it adjusts the range on your HSD automatically. I usually just leave it in decoupled mode. This here is the expand mode. If you have your screen set as the sensor of interest and you press this, it goes into expand 1 and 2, which just zooms it in. For example, I can zoom in on this waypoint right here. You can also use this button to expand it. If you press it, it works the same way. Also, if you hold down the pinky button, it will zoom in on you and your flight members in data link. The message button doesn't do anything. For the control button, I'll go over that in a second. This button is for your data link. If you press it, it goes to SMDL, which is an alternative data link that's not modeled in DCS right now, so make sure you leave it on TNDL. This button just freezes the screen. This button is also related to data link. If you have it on FR on, it shows all friendlies. If you have it to FL, it only shows friendlies that are in your flight, and you can have all friendlies off if you want. Now let's look at the control page. On the first control page, most of these buttons don't do anything according to the manual. The only ones that work is the rings button, which gets rid of the range rings, and also the nav button is supposed to get rid of your waypoints. However, right now it seems like it's not working. I'm not sure if it's bugged or if I'm just doing something wrong. If you click here, you can go to control page 2. The manual said that most of these buttons don't work either. The only ones that work here are air surveillance, which enables data link that you receive from an AWACS, and also SAM. SAM allows you to see SAM sites from data link or pre-planned ones. And you can press the page button to go back to the page 1, and you can click control to go back to the regular menu. Also, you might notice this little number right here. This number shows your range and bearing from your waypoint when you move your cursor. As you can see, if I move my cursor over the current selected waypoint, it's showing 0 miles. And if I move it away, it shows the range and bearing. You can also change it to where instead of showing from your waypoint, it shows from your bullseye. The bullseye is this thing right here, which is a reference point that your team uses. So if there's a target like right here over Senaki, you could tell your teammates that there's a target 064 for 16 miles from the bullseye. So if you want to enable the bullseye reference, you click the list button and click 0 to go to the miscellaneous page, and click 8. And here we're in the bullseye page. So you can just click 0 to enable bullseye, and you can select which waypoint your bullseye is at, but by default it's at waypoint 25. And now you can see for the numbers here, instead of being in reference from the waypoint, they're in reference to the bullseye. And you can see the bullseye symbol right here. So it's really just your preference if you want to have the bullseye on or not. That was a basic overview of the HSD. Now let's go into waypoint navigation. In the Viper, there are lots of waypoints you can fill in, and different ranges are used for different things. I'll show a diagram on the screen. 1 through 25 are regular waypoints. 26 through 30 are for Markpoints. 31 through 55 are for geographic lines. 56 through 70 are for pre-planned targets. 71 through 80 are for data link points that you receive from other planes. 81 through 99 are destinations like air bases, and 100 to 127 are for other types of data link targets. Now in DCS, I'm pretty sure that not all of this is completely modeled. I think that geographic lines are not modeled right now. The manual said that for now, data link points will be received in waypoint 500 and above. The most important thing to remember with the numbers is that when you create a mark point, they're auto-filled in from 26 to 30. So just don't put any regular waypoints in 26 through 30, because if you create a mark point, it will overwrite them. So let's go over how to select a waypoint to fly through. There's 2 ways you can do it. First, on your HSD, you can move your cursor over any waypoint and press TMS up, and that will select it to navigate to. And when you select it, you can see it fills in the dot. And when you select it, it'll show here. Right now I'm at steer point 2, and if I select this one, now it shows steer point 3. The other way you can select your waypoint is with this switch. If you move it up and down, you can see it selects these different fields. So what you want to do is select the field that says steer point, and you can use this rocker switch up and down to select your waypoints. Now let's go over how to fly to your waypoints. When you have your waypoint selected, you can see information about it on this very bottom line. This number on the right is which waypoint is selected. For example, waypoint 1, and if I go up, now waypoint 2, and the number on the left is how far away you are from it. So right now I'm 8 miles away. Now on your heads-up display, the waypoint will show up as a diamond here, and you can see there's an X over it, which means it's not in view of my HUD. So I need to turn the plane left, and once it gets within the view of my heads-up display, now you can see the diamond right there. You can also navigate with waypoints with this little screen down here. Click the M button till you go to nav mode, and this outer blue arrow will point to your waypoint, and you can see the distance right here. There's also this little indicator right here with a circle with a line coming out. This is supposed to make it easy to navigate to your waypoint, where you basically just fly to put your velocity vector around that circle. So for example, if I turn left and I put that little circle inside my velocity vector like this, then that should take me to my waypoint. So that was how to select and fly to a waypoint. Now let's go over how to view all your waypoints. The first way you can see them is by clicking the steer point button. Now you need to make sure you're in the main menu. So click return, and once you're in the main menu, you can click the number 4 here that says steer point. Here's your database with all your waypoints. As you can see, all these say 0. All I have are waypoint 3, 2, and 1. And a quick way to find a certain waypoint is by just typing in a number here and then clicking enter. And you can see I have waypoint 25 because that's the bullseye that's automatically filled in. Here you can see the latitude, longitude, and elevation of a waypoint, and you can also see TOS, which is time on station, and I'll go over that later. As you can see, it says manual right here. That means I am in manual mode, and if you use your rocker to select the man and click the number 0, it switches to automatic mode. And in automatic mode, once you fly over a waypoint, it automatically will select your next one for you. I'm going to put it back to manual mode. From this page, it's really easy to edit or add new waypoints. So for example, I'm going to go up to a blank waypoint here, and let's say I want to put a waypoint over this target practice runway. I'm going to hold left alt and left click, and the format the Viper uses is lat long decimal minutes. So I'm going to click 2 for north, and I'm going to type in 4150.525 and click enter, and then go down, and I'm going to type east. Now when you're doing your east or west coordinates, sometimes there'll be 3 numbers, sometimes there'll be 2. You can see here there's 2 numbers, just 4, 1. So if it starts with just 2 numbers, then you need to start it with a 0 in the Viper. So I'm going to type 0, 4, 1, and then 4, 7, and then 8, 8, 0, and click enter. And now I'll type the elevation in is 33 feet. And you don't need to put in a time on station if you don't want to. So now I have steer point 4. So I'm going to click return, and I'm going to have it selected here. If I look out there, you can see my waypoint 4 is on that cross runway now. So that was the first way you can look at your steer points and edit them from the steer point page. The other way you can do it is from the destination page. If you click list and then click 1 for destination, when you open the destination page, it's going to open the default one, which is UTM destination. I'll talk about that in a second. But what you need to do is click the sequence button, and that goes to your destination directory. Basically, this is another place you can look at your waypoints and edit them. Now you might be wondering what's the difference between this and the steer point page. They look exactly the same. The only difference is that when I was in the steer point page, when I select a steer point to edit, it also selects it for navigation. If I select steer point 7 for editing, when I click return to the main menu, you can see steer point 7 is also selected for navigation. But whenever you are in the destination directory, if I go to waypoint 10, it only selects it for editing. Once I go back to the main menu, you can see I still have waypoint 7 for navigation. Other than that, they're pretty much the same. So whenever you want to edit your steer points, you can either do it from the steer point page, or you can do it from the destination directory page. Now, when you input coordinates in the Viper, you have to put them in this format, which is degrees and then decimal minutes. However, you can put them in MGRS grid format if you want. However, the only coordinates you can input in grid formats are coordinates 20 through 25. So in the destination directory page, if you click sequence, it goes to other pages like offset aimpoint 1, offset aimpoint 2, and eventually you get to UTM destination. If you're in the list page, when you click the destination page, the default one it goes to is UTM destination. So UTM destination is where you can input grid waypoints. And as you can see, you can only do waypoint 21 through 25. So let's say I want to put a waypoint over the middle of this lake. The grid coordinates are here. So first you need to select the grid zone. So right now it's on 31N, but as you can see here, I need it to be 37T. So what I'm going to do is type in 37 and click enter. And now the letter is highlighted, and now you can use the dauber switch up and down to select your letters. So I have 37T and click enter. Now you need to put in your grid zone square. So it's AA right now, but I need it to be GG. So I'm going to go to G, click enter, and click G. And now you need to put in your easting and northing. So it needs 10 digits. So I'm going to type in 32399 and 43057. Click enter, and then you can type in your elevation in feet like normal. And this is super important. once you type in your grid coordinates, you have to convert them to regular lat long because everything in the F-16 is with the lat long format. So once you type in the grid coordinates, you have to go to the convert and click enter. If you don't do that, it's not going to work right. Then when I go to that waypoint 21 for navigating, if I fly over to it, it should be correct. As you can see, it's in the middle of that lake right there. So that is how you type in grid coordinates in the Viper. All right, now let's go over offset aim points. What an offset aim point for is, let's say I have waypoint 1 right here. And let's say my target is right here. So what I can do is, instead of making a new waypoint on my target, I can just say the angle and distance from waypoint 1. So what I can do is right click on waypoint 1 and I can say my target is 0.392 nautical miles and 213 degrees from waypoint 1. So what you do is click list and go back to that destination page, and I need to go to offset aim point 1 or 2. It doesn't matter. Each waypoint can have 2 offset aim points. I'm just going to go to 1. So first you need to type the range in feet. So this is 0.392 nautical miles. So I'm just going to convert that to feet real quick. That is 2,381 feet, and then click enter. And for the bearing, it needs to be in true heading, not magnetic heading. The blue one here is magnetic, so make sure it's the true heading, which is 213 degrees. So I'm going to type in 213. And remember, this has a decimal point at the end, so type it 0. So now 213. And then the elevation, so I can just put my mouse over this, and in the top it shows, so 545 feet. Click enter. So now my waypoint 1 should have an offset waypoint. Now the offset waypoint will show up as a triangle. As you can see, there's my waypoint, which is the diamond, but my offset waypoint is not showing up. That's because it actually does not show up by default. In order to see it, you have to be using some kind of sensor. For example, if I use my fire control radar and put it into ground mode, by default your fire control radar looks at your selected steer point. But what I can do is I can click this and I can say I want to look at my offset aim point instead. And you can see when I do that, now the triangle shows up and there is my offset aim point. That's all there is to say about offset aim points. But since I'm talking about sensors, there is something really important that you need to understand in the Viper. In the Viper, on some of your screens, you might see this little option come up that says CZ. This stands for cursor 0. This is a really important concept to understand in the Viper. In the Viper, whenever you have a sensor, like your ground radar or your targeting pod, by default, your sensors are always looking at your selected waypoint. For example, my targeting pod here, you can see it's aiming at my waypoint 1. However, when you have your sensor selected, you can move it around if you want. So whenever you move around your radar or your targeting pod, it actually moves your waypoint too, and it moves all the other waypoints with it. If I do my targeting pod here, when I move my targeting pod around, it's not just moving the pod, it's moving the waypoint itself. And all the other waypoints that are in your flight plan are all moving together. For example, if I go to waypoint 2, as you can see, the diamond is right in front of me, but when I move my targeting pod, the diamond is also moving because it's also moving the waypoint. Now you might be wondering, what is the point of this? The reason why is because over time, the navigation system in the Viper can drift, which means it can just become a little bit less accurate. So let's say I put a target point right on that target that I knew was here. And then by the time I get to my target, I notice that the diamond is not on my target, it's over here for some reason. In that case, I know, okay, the navigation system drifted. So when I look at it with my targeting pod, I'm gonna obviously put it back on my target, right? So the reason it moves your waypoint 2 and all the other waypoints is because a lot of the weapons systems in the F-16 are based on your waypoints. Like if you do a CCRP bomb drop, that does the calculations to drop the bomb on your waypoint. So it needs to move the waypoint itself to make sure your weapons are accurate. So what the CZ, what the cursor 0 is to move everything back to normal. The reason it's there is so it's not permanent. If I just move around my targeting pod randomly, obviously you don't want to move your waypoints into random places. You want to have the ability to just click CZ to set everything back to normal. So it's really important to understand that in DCS. Also, if you're using your targeting pod, one trick is that instead of pressing the cursor 0 button, you can press TMS aft, which is this switch right here, and it will take you back to your waypoint. If you moved your targeting pod around and you notice that, your waypoints are not in the correct location, you probably just need to click the cursor 0 button. Okay, now let's go over mark points in the Viper. Now, when I talked about waypoints, I mentioned that mark points are stored in waypoint 26 through 30. So when you're making your flight plan, it's important not to fill in any navigation points from 26 through 30, because whenever you make a mark point, it automatically overwrites those. So save 26 through 30 for your mark points. The way you create a mark point is first you need to make sure you're in the main menu, so click return. And then you click the mark button or the number 7. And there's different ways you can make mark points. As you can see, it says HUD, but if you click the sequence button, it selects the different methods, which are targeting pod or radar and overfly. And there's also an HMD method, which I'll show you. First, I'll show you how to do the HUD method. Make sure HUD is selected here, and you're going to see a dot in the middle of your velocity vector. So you can use your cursor to move the dot around. And as you fly, as you pitch the plane up and down, the dot will move. So if you want, you can press TMS up. TMS is this switch. If you press TMS up, it will ground stabilize it so it doesn't move anymore. And then you can still slew it. And let's say I want to put a mark point right on that building right there. As you can see, waypoint 26 is selected. So when I press TMS up again, it automatically fills in mark point 26. Then what I can do is click return. And if I click steer point 26 and enter, you can see it created a waypoint right there. So that is the HUD method. Let's go to the next one. Okay, this is the targeting pod method. What you need to do is select your targeting pod. I'm going to make a separate targeting pod video, but to activate it, click standby and click air to ground. And by default, it looks at your current selected waypoint. So just move your targeting pod wherever you want. Let's make a mark point on that building and press TMS up, and that will do a point track. And then press TMS up again, and that fills in the next one. See, it automatically did waypoint 27. And there's my mark point right there. Now with the targeting pod, the manual said your mark points will be much more accurate if you use the laser ranger at the same time. So make sure you turn your laser on, and once you are in targeting pod mode, what you need to do is hold down trigger first detent, and that will flash the laser. So while the laser is flashing, you hold TMS, you press TMS up, get a point track, and then press it again to create your mark point. And that will make a more accurate mark point. Let's go over the next method, which is with the radar. Just go ahead and move the radar wherever you want. I'm going to put it on this little island right here. Press TMS up. As you can see, I have it right there. Next, let's go over the overfly method. With the overfly method, you just fly right over wherever you want the mark point to be. For the overfly method, you need to make sure your HUD is set as the sensor of interest. So press DMS up, which is this switch. You should see the little star right there. So once you have that star, all you have to do is fly over wherever you want your mark point to be. So let's put my mark point right over this airbase. And once you're over it, you can press TMS up, and it will create the mark point. And let's go ahead and select it. And as you can see, there is my mark point. The last method is with your HMD. So in your HMD, you need to go to the HUD mode. And if you hold TMS up, target management switch up, you can see it puts a circle there. So what I can do is press TMS up to put that circle on the ground, and then I can use my cursor to move it where I want. Then I can do TMS up again to drop the mark point there. And then let's select waypoint 27, and you can see there's the mark point. All right, those were mark points for the navigation system. Now let's go over position fixes. The navigation system in the Viper can drift over time, which means that on long flights it can become less accurate and your waypoints may be a little off. Now the Viper does have a GPS system added into it, and whenever the GPS system figures out that your waypoints are really inaccurate, the GPS system can help to correct it. However, it's not perfect. The manual said that even with GPS, the navigation system in the Viper can still be a little bit off. It can still drift a little bit over time. It said that with the GPS system, the Viper's navigation system shouldn't drift any more than 300 feet, but it still can drift a little bit. So because of that, the Viper gives you the ability to fix your navigation system. If you click the list button and click the button number 4, you can see the nav status page. The system accuracy shows how accurate the navigation system is in your Viper. So as you can see, I have high accuracy, so in this case I wouldn't need to do a fix. The GPS accuracy shows how accurate the GPS information is. So the more satellites you're connected to at once, the more accurate your GPS information will be. Really quick note about GPS. In order to have GPS in your mission, there are two requirements. The first is that it has to take place during or after March 28, 1994. You can check the mission date in the briefing. You can also set the date in the mission editor by clicking the cloud button here and setting the date. The other requirement is that you need to have USA on your team. Your airplane doesn't need to be assigned to USA, you just need to have USA on your team. If you want to adjust the teams, you can click this button here. The only way to get around that is by clicking Customize and Mission Options, and then you can enforce unrestricted SatNav and then also enable it, and that will allow everyone in the mission to have access to GPS. The mission duration and the keys valid don't matter in DCS, so you don't need to worry about that. Now in the nav status page, you can click Sequence to go to the nav commands page. If you click any of these buttons on your keypad, it can switch it to INS only mode, which will use only the internal navigation system. It will not use GPS. If you press it again, it will go to auto mode, which uses GPS to help update your navigation system to try to keep it accurate. I'd recommend just leaving it in auto. If you hover over the reset GPS and click the 0 button, that will reinitialize your connection to the satellite stations. I'm not sure why you'd need to do that in DCS, but you can do it if you want. And if you do the zeroize GPS option, that will remove specific, in the manual it calls them keys. I guess it's some sort of encrypted or secure information that the plane has with GPS that makes it more accurate. I'm not sure how it works, but in the manual it said that if you zeroize the GPS, it will be less accurate. So I'd recommend just never touching this. So that's how you can tell how accurate your navigation system currently is. Let's say that your navigation system is not very accurate. Let's say you noticed your waypoints are off and they have drifted. You need to be able to fix it. Now, like I mentioned earlier in the video, if your waypoints are off, it could just be due to you moving your targeting pod or radar, and you should first see if it says cursor 0, and if you click that, it'll set your waypoints back to the normal position. But if you've already done cursor 0 and you notice that your waypoints are still off, that means your navigation system itself has drifted and needs to be updated. So a position fix in the Viper is kind of like when you move your cursor around. Like I mentioned, it moves the waypoints. It's just that when you move your radar around or targeting pod or whatever, it's not a permanent moving of your waypoints. When you click cursor 0, it goes back to normal. But when you do a position fix, it permanently moves your waypoints. So if you're in the main menu, you can click the fix button and you can use the sequence switch to see all the types of fixes. There's an overfly, radar, HUD, and targeting pod fix. Now, for all the position fixes, you need to have a waypoint selected. For example, here you can see it says 27, and you need to have a certain reference waypoint that you're going to use for your position fix. For example, let's say I had waypoint 20. This means that if I'm in overfly, that I would need to fly right over waypoint 20 when I do my position fix. Or if I'm in radar, this would mean that I'd need to point my radar at waypoint 20. So I'm just going to be using waypoint 1. So let's do in overfly first. This is the simplest one, but it's also the least accurate. All you do is you select your waypoint and you need to just fly right over it. And when you fly over it, you need to press TMS up. As you can see, my waypoint is right there, and let's say it was drifted. Let's say it was showing my waypoint is over here for some reason. What I would have to do is I would fly right over my waypoint, press TMS up, and then when you do that, you should see this line that says delta should freeze. And then once it does that, you can either click enter to accept the position fix, or you can press TMS aft to reject it and try again. Now let's go over a radar position fix. In order for this to work, you need to have your waypoints over something that is easily identifiable on the radar. For example, this lake right here would be good for a radar position fix because this lake will be really easy to see on a radar because it'll just show up as black. So I'm gonna make a waypoint on here real quick. I set the lake to waypoint 4. So when I do my radar position fix, first, if it says cursor 0, like always, make sure to click it to zero everything out. And as you can see, everything is correct here. My radar is right over the lake. But if your navigation system was drifted, your radar might be looking off. It might be looking over to the side or something. So what you do is put your radar right over where the waypoint should be. And then you can press TMS up to get a lock. And then you can either press enter here to accept the fix, or you can reject the fix by pressing TMS aft and then cursor 0. Now let's go over a targeting pod fix. All you do is just point your targeting pod wherever your waypoint is supposed to be. Press TMS up to get a point track, and then you can press enter to accept the fix, or you can press TMS aft and cursor 0 to reject the fix. Now, the manual says that with the targeting pod, when you're doing a fix, they recommend to have your laser on while you accept the fix to be more accurate. So make sure the laser is armed, hold down the first stage of the trigger, and then click enter. Lastly, you can do a fix with the HUD. What you do is set your HUD as your sensor of interest with DMS up, and then you can move the steer point where it's supposed to be, and then you can either click enter to accept it, or you can press cursor 0 to reject it. Alright, that was position fixes. Now let's go over the ACAL page. If you press the button 9, it takes you to the ACAL. This page is to make sure your altitude is correct. As you can see, we have the auto ACAL mode here. You can have it in GPS, DTS, or both. If you have it in GPS mode, it will use the GPS to make sure you are at the correct altitude, and if not, it will correct it for you. If you press any button on your keypad, it'll change it to DTS, which is Digital Terrain System. The way that this works is that if your radar altimeter is turned on, when you're flying over mountains and bumpy terrain, the radar will measure the difference in elevation of the terrain, and it has a terrain database built in the plane. So just with the radar altimeter, it can kind of figure out where you are, and it can tell what your altitude is supposed to be. And if it notices your altitude is wrong, it can correct it. So basically, if you have GPS selected, it uses GPS to fix your altitude. In DTS, it uses the Digital Terrain System to fix your altitude. And if you have it set to both, it will just use whichever one is currently more accurate. There's also some other lines here. Nav filter is the same thing we had from the nav commands page here. You can see filter mode auto or INS only. Auto will use GPS and INS. Once again, I recommend leaving it in auto. GPS accuracy is also what we saw on the other page. This just shows how many GPS stations we're connected to. And this is the DTS accuracy. So if it says L here, that is for low accuracy, M is for medium accuracy, H is for high accuracy. So if you just fly over flat land, the DTS accuracy is pretty low because it's kind of hard for it to figure out where you are. But if you start flying over mountains or bumpy terrain, you'll notice the accuracy will go up to medium or high. That's because with all the difference in elevation, it's pretty easy for the DTS system to narrow down where you are. So if you have the mode set to both, it will just look at what is currently more accurate, your GPS or the DTS, and it will use that to update your altitude in the plane to make sure it's correct. So that is the auto altitude calibration mode, but if you press it to sequence, you can go into manual altitude calibration mode. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this. I'd recommend just staying in auto. So if you select the man here and click any number, it automatically goes back to auto. But if you want, you can technically do a manual altitude calibration. And there's different modes. You can do a radar altitude calibration, which is basically a waypoint overfly. You can do radar calibration, HUD calibration, or targeting pod calibration. And if you press sequence, you can switch between position, altitude, or both. So in altitude mode, it'll just fix your altitude. In position mode, it'll fix your position, and both will fix both. So first, let's go over the radar altitude mode. As you can see, when you use the rocker switch, it adjusts your waypoint. So you just select a waypoint to fly to, and then all you have to do is fly over the waypoint. And once you're over it, you can press TMS up. And once you press TMS up, it will capture the radar altimeter value. And you can either press enter to accept the fix, or you can press TMS aft to reject it. Next, let's go over radar mode. Now, in order for the radar mode to work, the slant range has to be a maximum of 10 miles away. So let me go ahead and put my radar into ground mode. So when I move my radar closer and farther away from me, you can see this here shows the slant range. So right now it's 1.1, and when I move it out, now it's at 5.6. So in order to do an altitude calibration with your radar, the max slant range it allows is 10 miles. So if your waypoint was off, what you do is put the radar where it's supposed to be and do TMS up to get a lock. And then you could either press enter to accept the fix, or you can press TMS aft to reject it and press cursor 0. Now let's go over a HUD fix. For this one, all you do is set your HUD as the sensor of interest, move the waypoint where it's supposed to be, press TMS up, and then you can press enter to accept it, or you can press TMS aft to reject it and press cursor 0. Lastly, we have the targeting pod fix. You go to your targeting pod, move it where the waypoint is supposed to be, TMS up to get a point track, and then in order to be more accurate, you could turn the laser on and hold down the first stage of the trigger to activate the laser ranger. And then you can either press enter to accept the fix, or you can press TMS aft to unlock it, and you can press TMS aft again to cursor 0. That was how to do fixes in the Viper. Now let's go over VRP and VIP. First we'll go over VRP, which is Visual Reference Point. So in the Viper, a lot of the weapon modes use the waypoints for target acquisition. For example, if you do CCRP bombing mode, that will use your waypoints for the bomb solution. But the problem is, whenever you are doing your bomb run, whenever you are doing your final adjustments to put the target box right on the target, there might be some problems you run into. For example, let's say your target is obstructed behind something, and by the time you finally see it, you don't have time to adjust it. You need to just drop your bombs. Or let's say, just in general, you want to make sure you have it slewed perfectly before you go in for your bomb run, so you don't have to worry about something like that. Well, what you can do is use VRP, which is Visual Reference Point. What you do is set a reference point to your target waypoint, and then what you can do is, instead of adjusting your target, you can adjust the reference point, and when the reference point moves, the target also moves. So that will make sure your target is accurate. So first thing I need is a target waypoint. I'm just going to put a waypoint on this thing again. I'm going to put down a little marker just so I can remember for myself, and I'm going to hold left alt and left click to put down a little blue circle, and let's just make this waypoint 5. Okay, I created waypoint 5 on my X. Now you can go list and you can click VRP or number 9 for visual reference point. So as you can see, you can select your target here. So I want target 5, that's going to be my target, and we can put the bearing and range and elevation difference of our reference point. So here's my target, and let me choose something as the reference. Let's say I want this building here to be the reference point. So what I can do is, if I set the building as the reference point, when I'm coming in, all I have to do is make sure the little reticle is, centered on the building properly, and then it'll also move the target point, so I don't have to worry about it. I know the target point will be adjusted properly also, and I can come in for my bomb run. So what you do is select your ruler right here and right click on your target, and then you right click on your reference point, and the ruler will give you the bearing and range. So let's get the bearing first. Remember, you want to do true bearing, so do not do the blue one, that is magnetic, do the black one, which is true. So it's 56, so just type 56 and then click a 0. So it says 56 degrees here, click enter. Now the range is in feet. Here it's in 1.57 nautical miles, so I'm going to convert that to feet. So it's 9,539 feet, and click enter. And then the elevation here is not the elevation of the reference point, it's the elevation difference. The elevation of my target is 33 feet, which you can see on top, and the elevation of my reference point is 51. So you need the difference. So since the reference point is higher than my target point, I do 51 minus 33, which is 18. So that means my reference point is 18 feet above my target point. So what I do is type 18 and click enter. And now my reference point should be plugged in properly. Now, if your reference point is below your target point, you need to do a negative number. For example, if I wanted to do negative 18, all you do is just type in 0 as your first number and then type in 18. And now it's negative 18, but I need to put it as positive 18. And then all you have to do is enable your reference point. Hover over this and click 0. And now my visual reference point is enabled for steer point 5. Now, whenever you're just flying like normal, you're not going to see your reference point. You're just going to see your target point. In order to see your reference point, you need to be using a pre-planned air-to-ground attack mode that uses waypoints as targeting points. So just for example, I'm going to go to air to ground mode, and I'm going to be using CCRP, because CCRP is one of the modes that uses your waypoints for weapon employment. Now once you do that, you should see your target show up as a square, but you can see the diamond is on the reference point here. So basically what this means is, when I'm coming in for my bomb run, if I can't see the target initially for some reason, instead of trying to adjust this perfectly, I can just adjust the diamond perfectly. And if I know that the diamond is perfectly on the reference point, then the square should be perfectly on the target point. And when you're moving it, if you mess anything up and you want to go back, like always, you can just click cursor 0. Now, when you're using sensors to aim, like your radar or your targeting pod, what you can do is press the button here, and you can see I can center my radar on my reference point or on my target point. There's also an alternative way to designate your reference point. Normally, I can just slew it like this. But if you want, you can also use TMS up to drop it right under you in case you want to overfly the reference point. So when you first enter CCRP mode or any other mode like that, if you have reference point selected here, and if your HUD is the sensor of interest, then what you can do is fly right over your reference point. And as I press TMS up, it'll drop the reference point right below me, and it will also adjust the target point. Now, one last thing to go over for VRP is when you're in the VRP menu, if you click it, you can also see pull-up point here. This will just put an extra circle on your HUD in case you're doing a bombing attack where you have an initial pull-up, so you can know where that pull-up is. So the pull-up is in reference to your target point, just like the VRP. So let's say when I do my bombing run, I know my pull-up point is going to be right here on the edge of this grass. All you would do is go to true bearing, and let's see what it is, 045. So I'm going to type 45 and then the 0 decimal point. And then range is in feet once again. So I have to convert nautical miles to feet, which is 8081, and click enter. And then the elevation difference once again. So my target point was 33 and my pull-up point is at 36. So it's 3 feet higher. And then you just go up here and press 0 to enable the pull-up point. And now you can see there's my pull-up point reference right there. Okay, so that was visual reference point. Now let's go over visual initial point, or VIP. So VIP is if you have an initial point, which is basically where you start your attack from. VIP is very similar to VRP. The only difference is that whenever we were in VRP, our target point is on our waypoint 5. As you can see, I had waypoint 5 here, which is my target, and everything else was in reference to that. The reference point and the pull-up point was in reference to this. But whenever you're in VIP, which is visual initial point, your waypoints here, instead of being your target, your waypoint is the initial point. And your targets and your pull-up point are in reference to your initial point. So VIP is basically just kind of like the opposite of VRP. The other difference is that VRP does everything in feet and VIP does everything in nautical miles. So VIP is for longer distance things. So let me show you how to do VIP. Just press list and press number 3. First, I need to set a waypoint as my initial point. So let's say I want my initial point where I start my attack to be right here. So let me just make a waypoint real quick. So I created waypoint 6 right there, which is my VIP where I want to start the attack. Then click list and click 3 for the VIP page. And we need to select which waypoint is our VIP, which is waypoint 6. And then we got to figure out where our target is. So let's say I want my target to be the start of this runway. I'm going to right click on my VIP and then right click here. And I'm going to get the angle, which is 201 degrees. So let me type in 201 and click enter. And the range, which is in nautical miles. As you can see, it's 0.96 here. So I'm going to just type in 9 and click enter because that's the closest I can get. And for the elevation difference at my waypoint, it is 23, and for the target point it's 33. So the target point is 10 feet higher than the IP, so I'm going to set the elevation difference to 10 and click enter. And then let's click 0 to enable VIP to target mode. I just realized I accidentally set this to 20 instead of 201. There we go. So as you can see now in VIP mode, just like with VRP, you need to be in air to ground mode and have something like CCRP. And you can see the diamond is my waypoint here, which is my initial point. And in reference to the waypoint, I created the target point. So when I move the waypoint, it moves the target point as well. You can press cursor 0 to reset it. And once again, with your sensors, you can either center it on the IP or the target point. Now, just like with VRP mode, VIP mode also has the pull-up point, which is optional. So let's say I want a pull-up point right here. Remember, everything is in reference to the IP. So I start from the IP, go to the pull-up point, and we have 201 for 0.5 nautical miles. So let's type in 201 here, and we'll do 0.5. And for the elevation difference, we have 23 and 29. So it's plus 6 feet. And let's hover over it and press 0 and you can see there is our pull-up point. So as you can see, VRP and VIP are very similar. It's just that VRP uses feet, VIP uses nautical miles, and in VRP, your waypoint is your target point, and everything is referenced from that. In VIP, your waypoint is your initial point, and everything is referenced from that. Also, just like with VRP, in VIP mode, when you first enter CCRP or something like that, you'll have IP selected here, and if your HUD is sensor of interest, you can press TMS up, and it will designate the IP right under you, and you can press cursor 0 to reset it to normal. I already went over offset aim points earlier, but one more thing I want to mention is that you can also use offset aim points to kind of have similar functionality to VIP and VRP. For example, I have my offset aim point here, and I can put the offset aim point over the place where it's supposed to be, and it will move my target point. That was everything for navigation. The last thing I'm going to go over are some extra pages on the computer here. First is the CRUS page. Here you can enter the different CRUS modes. By default is TOS, which is time on station. So back when we were in the steer point page, you can see each waypoint had a TOS, which is when you need to get to the waypoint, like at 10:41, 27 seconds. So if you go to CRUS mode in TOS, if you click 0, it activates TOS mode, and you can see the time on station for your waypoints, and you can see the ETA, which is approximately when you'll get there. And what it will do is it'll put a little caret on your HUD that shows what speed you need to be going at to reach your waypoint at the right time. As you can see, the caret is below my speed, so I would need to slow down. The next mode we have here is range mode. So you can select a steer point here, and this will tell you how much gas you'll have left once you get to that steer point. You can also press 0 to activate range mode. It'll highlight it here. When you have range mode activated, you'll have a caret that will show you what speed you need to fly to get the maximum range or distance that you can fly at your current altitude. Next is home mode. So you can set a home point, which you'd usually do as an airbase you're going to land at. And the fuel here shows how much fuel you'll have left if you fly directly to your home base at your current speed and altitude. There's also this optimum altitude here, which is the optimum altitude to fly at to use the least amount of fuel as possible. You can also press home to enable home mode, and you'll have a caret for your altitude and a caret for your speed. So the caret for your altitude shows the optimum altitude to fly at to save as much fuel as possible. And the caret here for your speed shows the optimum speed to fly at to use the least amount of fuel as possible when heading to your home waypoint. The last CRUS mode is endurance mode. Endurance mode shows you how much time till you reach your bingo fuel level. And by the way, you can set your bingo fuel level by clicking list and pressing bingo. So it shows the time to your bingo fuel level, and it shows the optimum Mach to fly at to fly for as long as possible. And if you enable it, it'll give you a caret which shows you which speed you should be at to fly for as long as possible. And you can turn off any of the modes by hovering over it and clicking 0 again. So that was the CRUS page. Another page is the magnetic variation. If you click list and miscellaneous and 2, this shows the magnetic variation. The navigation system in the Viper only knows your true heading. However, when you navigate in airplanes, you use the magnetic heading. So it has a database in the plane that knows the magnetic variation at every location, and it uses that variation so you can see magnetic heading on the HUD. So if you click any number, it'll put it to manual mode, and then you can type it in. And if you click it again, it goes back to automatic mode. I recommend just leaving it in automatic. Another page is the ALOW page. If you're in the main menu and you click 2, it goes to your altitude warning. The CARA altitude is your altitude above the ground, so you could set it to 500 feet or 1,000 feet or whatever. MSL altitude is your altitude warning above the sea level. Then there is the time page. In the main menu, you click 6 and you go to the time page. This shows what current time it is. This is the hack time, which is basically a stopwatch. You can type in what time you want it to start at. For example, I'll just start it at 10 seconds. So type in 000010 and click enter. And it'll start at 10 and it'll just count up. And you can use the rocker switch to reset it. Delta time on steer points. This will adjust your time on steer point for all your waypoints at the same time. So in the steer point page, the time on steer point here is only for the current steer point, for steer point 3, steer point 4, whatever. But when you're in the time page, the delta time on steer point adds or subtracts time from every steer point. Let's say you had the times for all your steer points set up perfectly, and then you decide, okay, you need to push the mission forward 5 minutes. So if you want to add 5 minutes to all the steer points at the same time, what you can do is just type 5 and 0, 0. So that's 5 minutes, and click enter. And let's say I want to set it back to how it was. If you want to subtract time, you can do a negative, so press 0 for negative. And when you do a negative, it starts from the left side. So now I have to go 0, 0, 0, 5, 0, 0, enter, and that'll set it back to how it was. And then you can also set the month, day, and year, but you don't need to do that in DCS. Those were all the extra pages. The last thing to go over for navigation is attitude mode. This is your INS switch here. As you can see, we're in navigate mode. You mainly use this just when you're starting the plane up to align it. But as you can see, there's also attitude mode here. This is basically a backup mode. If your navigation system is broken for some reason, you can just set it to attitude mode and it will give you basic information like your pitch, roll, and heading. However, you won't be able to use it for waypoints or anything like that. It's just a very basic navigation mode. Although I don't think you really ever need to use it in DCS. That was navigation for the Viper. Thanks for checking out this video, and I'll see you later.